The beast should have killed the princess in seconds. That was what every tactical prediction said. That was what the soldiers believed. That was what the jungle itself demanded. But the human boy stepped in first. The transport convoy moved slowly through the canyon pass, its armored carriers grinding against dark volcanic stone while thick blue mist drifted between the cliffs. Above them, the sky churned with heavy storm clouds lit by distant flashes of green lightning. Nobody liked traveling through the Nurok belt. Not humans, not merchants, and definitely not alien royalty. The entire region was classified as unstable Death World territory. Predators nested in the cliffs. Toxic spores drifted through the air after sunset. Entire military patrols had disappeared there without recovering bodies. Most civilized species avoided the place entirely. Humans didn't. That alone already made the aliens uncomfortable. The convoy stretched across the narrow route in organized formation. Royal guards marched alongside the central carrier while drones scanned overhead for movement. Massive energy cannons rotated slowly from mounted positions. And still, everyone looked nervous. Everyone except the human workers. They moved naturally through the convoy, checking engines, stabilizing cargo, repairing overheated systems without panic. They were younger than most of the guards, smaller too, but strangely calm, like the environment didn't bother them as much as it should. Kale wiped grease from his hands and stepped down from the side panel of the transport engine. The cooling system had failed again. That made the third time in 6 hours. Typical. Nothing survived long in Nurok weather. The heat ruined circuits. The spores clogged filters. The acidic rain ate through exposed metal if it sat too long. Most species considered the place uninhabitable. Humans called it difficult. Kyle grabbed his toolkit and moved toward the supply rack while soldiers passed him without acknowledgement. He was used to that. Humans weren't respected much outside labor contracts, especially not young humans. To the alien warriors, he looked harmless, too skinny, too young, too soft. That assumption kept getting humans underestimated across the galaxy. A nearby transport hatch slid open with a soft hiss. Kyle glanced over instinctively and immediately lowered his eyes. Royal. The guards straightened instantly as a tall alien girl stepped from the carrier. Silver ceremonial markings traced along her dark skin, while thin strands of glowing fabric hung from her shoulders like liquid light. Princess Lyra. Daughter of Warlord Vexus, one of the most feared military rulers in the outer sectors. The guards treated her carefully, almost fearfully. But Lyra ignored them completely. Her attention wandered across the convoy with visible boredom. Then she noticed Kyle. "You're the human mechanic," she said. "Not insulting, just curious." Kyle hesitated before nodding. "Maintenance support. That means mechanic, I guess." Her eyes shifted toward the exposed engine panel behind him. "You repaired that while the convoy was moving?" "Yeah. You weren't afraid?" Kyle blinked once. "Of the engine?" "Of falling into the canyon." He glanced briefly over the edge where endless darkness disappeared beneath the mist. Then shrugged. "Falling's usually the fast way to die here." Several nearby guards exchanged uncomfortable looks. Lyra tilted her head slightly. "You joke about death often. Humans joke about everything." That answer surprised her enough to make her smile slightly. Small, quick, but real. Most beings in the convoy had spent the entire journey terrified of speaking incorrectly around royalty. Kyle barely seemed aware she was important. Or maybe he simply didn't care. "You're different from the others," she said. Kyle adjusted the toolkit against his shoulder. "How?" "The guards avoid speaking to me unless ordered." "You're the princess. That usually makes them worse." Kyle almost smiled at that. Almost. The sound of distant thunder rolled across the canyon as the convoy continued forward. Overhead drones shifted formation, scanning deeper into the cliffs. One of the alien commanders approached quickly. "Princess, you should return inside the carrier." Lyra sighed immediately. "You say that every 10 minutes. Because this region remains unsafe. That's also every 10 minutes. The commander ignored the sarcasm. Movement has been detected nearby. That changed the atmosphere instantly. The guards tightened formation. Weapons shifted upward. Drone scanners accelerated. Kale noticed it too. The silence. Narak jungles were never quiet. Never. There were always sounds, wind, distant shrieks, rock movement, something alive in the cliffs. But now, nothing. The princess noticed the change in his expression. What is it? Kale looked toward the canyon walls. I don't like quiet. The commander immediately signaled the convoy to increase speed. Too late. Something moved above them. Fast. A shadow crossed the cliffs for half a second before disappearing again. Several soldiers raised weapons instantly. Contact left side. The convoy halted violently. Drones rotated upward. Motion scanners began flashing warning symbols across multiple displays. Then, one of the drones vanished, not exploded, not damaged. Gone. Something enormous had grabbed it from the air and pulled it into the mist. The entire convoy froze. Kyle felt his stomach tighten immediately. Predator. Big one. Another alarm activated farther back. Then, another. Movement everywhere now. The soldiers spread outward defensively while energy weapons charged with sharp rising whines. Princess Lyra stepped backward toward the carrier, but her attention stayed fixed upward. What is that? Nobody answered her. Because nobody knew. Then the scream came. Short. Violent. Cut off instantly. One of the rear guards disappeared into the cliffs so quickly it barely looked real. The convoy erupted into chaos, soldiers shouting, weapons firing blindly into the fog, drones scattering overhead. KL grabbed the side railing as the ground shook beneath them. Something huge was moving through the canyon walls, fast enough to circle the convoy. A second guard vanished. This time, everyone saw it. A massive black creature burst from the mist, all claws and muscle and jagged armored skin. Its jaws closed around the soldier before launching back into the cliffs with terrifying speed. Blood sprayed across the stone. Panic spread instantly. Even the alien warriors looked shaken now. Protect the princess. Guards rushed toward Lyra as another impact slammed into the rear transport hard enough to flip it sideways. Metal screamed. Explosions burst from exposed engines. Kyle saw the problem immediately. The convoy formation had broken. And now the Predator could isolate targets, exactly what it wanted. Another roar echoed through the canyon, closer this time. The guards tightened around Lyra while scanners flashed uncontrollably. One soldier looked directly at Kyle. Human. Inside the carrier now. But Kyle wasn't looking at the soldiers anymore. He was staring at the cliffs above them, watching massive shapes move through the mist. Tracking. Waiting. Hunting. And deep in his gut, something felt wrong. Not fear. Instinct. The kind humans learned long before civilization. The kind that whispered one terrifying truth: something was about to hit them directly. The first impact hit the front transport hard enough to throw armored soldiers off their feet. Metal bent inward. One of the engine compartments exploded in sparks and blew fire as the convoy lost formation completely. The beast moved through the smoke before anyone could track it. Fast. Far too fast for something that large. Kale caught only fragments of it between flashes of weapons fire, black armored hide, massive claws, rows of jagged teeth wet with blood. Another guard disappeared, screaming into the fog. The Predator wasn't attacking randomly anymore. It was separating targets. Hurting them. Alien soldiers formed defensive lines around Princess Lyra, while drones fired scanning beams into the cliffs, but the terrain worked against them. The canyon walls created blind angles everywhere. The beast knew the environment. The convoy didn't. Move the princess. A commander shouted. The royal guards pulled Lyra toward the central carrier, while weapons fired continuously into the mist. Kyle grabbed a fallen shock tool from the ground and backed toward the damaged engine compartment instinctively. His heart hammered against his ribs, hard enough to hurt. This was bad. Not just dangerous. Collapse level bad. The convoy was panicking, and panic got people killed fast. A drone overhead suddenly split apart mid-air. Not shot. Torn open, the creature dropped from above with terrifying force, crashing directly into the middle escort unit. The impact shook the canyon floor. Now everyone saw it clearly. Huge, at least 4 meters tall at the shoulder. Its body looked like overlapping volcanic armor fused with muscle. White steam rose from gaps along its spine, while glowing eyes locked onto movement through the smoke. The beast roared once. Half the convoy froze. The sound hit something ancient inside the brain. Predator. Apex predator. The kind living creatures were born fearing. The alien soldiers opened fire instantly. Energy rounds slammed into the creature's armored hide, but most ricocheted uselessly away. The few that penetrated only seemed to anger it more. The beast lunged. One guard vanished beneath its claws. Another was thrown hard enough into the canyon wall to crack armor plating. Everything collapsed after that. Formation broke. Communication dissolved into overlapping screams and orders. Some soldiers fired wildly, others retreated instinctively. The predator tore through the center line faster than trained warriors could react. Princess Lyra became separated during the chaos. Kael saw it happen in a single terrible moment. One exploding transport forced the guards apart. Smoke flooded the pathway. The princess stumbled away from the carrier, trying to avoid debris, straight toward the canyon edge. And the beast saw her. Its glowing eyes locked onto movement instantly. Every instinct in Kael screamed the same thing at once: run, hide, survive. But another instinct hit harder. She was alone. The beast launched forward. Massive claws shattered stone as it charged directly toward the princess. Lyra tried backing away, but the loose canyon gravel slipped beneath her feet. She fell hard near the cliff edge. The guards shouted desperately from the smoke, but they were too far away, too slow, too late. Hale moved before thinking. 1 second he stood beside the damaged engine compartment. The next, he was running straight at the predator, not brave, not heroic. Instinct. Pure human instinct. He grabbed a broken metal rod from the wreckage while sprinting toward the princess. "Hey!" The shout ripped from his throat automatically. The beast turned toward him instantly. Good. That was good. He didn't know why it mattered, only that it did. Keep its attention. Keep it away from her. The predator changed direction violently and charged him instead. Kael barely had time to raise the metal rod before the creature hit him. The impact felt like getting struck by a transport vehicle. Pain exploded through his entire body as claws slammed him across the canyon floor. The rod snapped uselessly in his hands. Something cracked inside his ribs. He rolled hard against the stone, vision blurring instantly. The beast roared above him. Huge. Close, too close. Every logical part of his brain screamed that he was dead. Then he heard Lyra behind him, crying, terrified. And something changed. The predator lunged downward. Kael threw himself between it and the princess without thinking. Massive jaws closed around his shoulder and upper arm with crushing force. Agony detonated through him. White hot. Instant. The beast lifted him partially off the ground before slamming him back against the stone. Lyra screamed his name. Kael barely heard it. Pain drowned everything else. His vision pulsed violently as blood spread down his side. That should have ended it. For most species, it would have. The alien soldiers watching from the smoke stopped moving entirely. Because no one survived a Nurok predator bite. No one. The creature released him and stepped backward slightly, expecting collapse. Expecting weakness. Instead, Kael pushed himself back up. Shaking, bleeding heavily, but standing. The beast paused, confused. Kyle couldn't even think clearly anymore. Pain flooded everything. His arm barely worked. His shoulder felt torn apart. But one thought remained perfectly clear. The creature was still looking at Lyra, and that thought overrode everything else. Human adrenaline hit like fire. Fast, violent, absolute. Fear twisted instantly into aggression. Kyle grabbed a broken piece of burning metal from the wreckage beside him and screamed at the predator with raw desperation. Get away from her. The beast recoiled slightly. Not from the weapon. From him. Kyle charged first. Not trained. Not tactical. Animal. He slammed the burning metal directly into the creature's face. The predator roared violently and lashed sideways, claws tearing across Kyle's side again. More pain, more blood. But he didn't stop. He hit it. Again. And again, screaming the entire time. The soldiers stared in disbelief. No formation, no combat discipline, no fear response anymore. Just relentless human aggression. Kyle threw tools, debris, anything he could grab. He kept himself between the beast and the princess, no matter how many times the creature struck him aside. The predator started backing away, not injured badly enough to lose, but uncertain. Because prey wasn't supposed to do this. Prey ran. Prey submitted. This human kept advancing while half destroyed. Kyle barely recognized himself anymore. His body moved entirely on instinct. Protect. Attack. Protect again. Every time the beast looked past him toward Lyra, he attacked harder. The creature roared and lunged once more. Kyle met it head-on with another scream, smashing a jagged piece of metal directly into one glowing eye. The beast reeled backward violently. For the first time since the attack, it hesitated, and predators that hesitate start losing fights. The alien soldiers finally regrouped enough to open coordinated fire. Heavy energy blasts slammed into the creature's armored side repeatedly. Explosions burst across the canyon walls as the beast retreated backward into the mist with an enraged roar. Then it disappeared. Gone. Silence crashed over the canyon. Smoke drifted through burned transport wreckage while soldiers slowly lowered their weapons in stunned disbelief. Kyle remained standing for 2 more seconds. Only 2. His body finally realized how damaged it was. The broken metal slipped from his fingers. His legs gave out beneath him. But even as he collapsed, he twisted himself toward the princess first, still shielding her with his body. The canyon stayed silent after the beast disappeared. Not calm. Stunned, smoke drifted through shattered convoy vehicles, while emergency alarms echoed against the cliffs in broken intervals. Soldiers moved carefully through the wreckage, checking for survivors, scanning the mist for another attack. Nobody spoke about what they had just seen, because nobody fully understood it yet. Princess Lyra dropped to her knees beside Kyle the moment he collapsed. Blood spread beneath him rapidly, dark against the stone. His breathing came unevenly now, shallow and strained. The bite wound across his shoulder looked catastrophic. One of the alien medics rushed forward, then stopped short after seeing the damage. "You still conscious?" Kyle barely heard the voice. Everything sounded distant, muted. His vision blurred in and out, while pain pulsed through every part of him like fire beneath his skin. But even then, he still tried lifting himself slightly toward Lyra. You okay?" The medic stared at him in disbelief. That should not have been his first question. Lyra looked horrified. "You protected me." Kale blinked slowly, struggling to focus. You were in danger. Like that explained everything. To him, it did. The soldiers around them exchanged unsettled looks. They had seen warriors freeze during the attack. Trained fighters, experienced guards. The human boy had moved first, not because he was stronger, because he hadn't hesitated. The medic finally regained focus and activated a scanning device over Kale's body. The results immediately flashed red. Internal bleeding, fractured ribs, severe tissue trauma. Blood loss reaching critical levels. The medic looked genuinely confused. He should be unconscious. Cale coughed painfully, blood staining the corner of his mouth. Yeah, he muttered weakly. Probably. Lyra stayed beside him despite multiple guards urging her away from the danger zone. The princess ignored every order. Her eyes remained locked on the human boy who had nearly died for her without even thinking about it. That part frightened her most. He hadn't calculated odds, hadn't weighed consequences. He simply saw danger and moved. Like protecting her mattered more than protecting himself. A massive transport engine roared overhead. Everyone in the canyon immediately straightened. Royal Command Vessel. The warlord had arrived. The black armored carrier descended through the smoke like a moving fortress, its engines shaking loose stone from the cliffs as elite soldiers poured out around the landing zone. Then, Warlord Vexus stepped onto the canyon floor. Huge. Cold. Every movement controlled with military precision. His presence alone silenced the entire convoy instantly. Vexus surveyed the destruction without emotion. Dead soldiers, burned vehicles, blood across the stone. Then, his eyes found his daughter. Alive, relief flickered across his expression so briefly most missed it entirely. Then he saw Kyle, the wounded human lying protectively in front of her. And the warlord stopped moving. One of the commanders approached immediately. "My lord, the predator ambushed the convoy. What happened?" Not loud, not emotional, but absolute. The commander hesitated, because the explanation sounded impossible. The human protected the princess. Vexus looked at Kyle again, then at the deep claw marks carved into the canyon floor, then at the blood trail leading toward the mist where the beast had retreated. His gaze sharpened. The human fought the Nurok predator? The commander swallowed carefully. "Yes, my lord. That is not possible." "No, my lord." The answer hung heavily in the silence, because everyone there had witnessed it, and none of them could fully explain it. Vexus stepped closer while medics continued scanning Kyle desperately. The results worsened by the second. One medic finally spoke nervously. "My lord, his injuries exceed survivable thresholds. Yet he lives." "Yes." The medic hesitated before adding quietly, and he remained combative after the bite. That changed something. Several elite warriors nearby shifted uneasily. Nurok predators carried neurotoxic compounds strong enough to paralyze armored war species within seconds. Even surviving the initial bite was almost unheard of. Continuing to fight afterward, that bordered on insanity. Vexus crouched slightly near Kyle, studying him carefully, not with pity, with analysis. Kyle forced one eye open weakly. The warlord's massive silhouette blurred in his vision. "You're loud," Kyle muttered. Several guards stiffened immediately in shock. Nobody spoke casually to Warlord Vexus, especially not injured civilians. But the warlord didn't react. If anything, he seemed more interested. "Why did you protect her?" Kale frowned slightly like the question itself confused him. "She was alone." "That does not answer me." Kale's breathing tightened painfully before he answered again. "She's my friend." The canyon went completely silent, not because the answer sounded dramatic, because it sounded genuine. Simple, instinctive, and somehow that made it heavier. Vexus studied the human boy for several long seconds, then looked toward the medics. Explain his condition. The lead medic activated a holographic display immediately. "We believe the human entered an extreme adrenal survival state after the attack. Biological scans rotated through the air, hormone spikes, neural overload. Pain suppression indicators far beyond normal levels." The medic continued carefully. "The human nervous system appears capable of overriding physical trauma temporarily under protective stress conditions." One of the alien officers frowned. "Protective stress?" The medic hesitated, then enlarged another section of the scan. "We found abnormal psychological patterning during analysis." "Meaning?" The medic glanced toward Kale and Princess Lyra. Humans appear to form emotional pack attachments. That drew confused reactions immediately. Pack behavior? Yes. The medic enlarged the neurological readings again. When a human subconsciously identifies another individual as part of their emotional group, their survival priorities change dramatically. The officer stared at the display. You're saying he fought the predator because of instinct? No, the medic replied quietly. He fought because he mentally classified the princess as someone under his protection. Silence spread again. Heavier this time, because now the attack made sense. And somehow, that made it more terrifying. The medic continued. Pain tolerance increased. Fear response diminished. Aggression escalated beyond rational self-preservation. Another officer looked disturbed. That sounds unstable. The medic nodded slowly. It is. Vexus remained completely still while processing the information. The holographic display shifted again, showing the timeline of Kale's physical condition during the fight. Injury, shock, blood loss, expected collapse point. And then, continued aggression, continued movement, continued protection behavior. The data didn't resemble military discipline. It resembled something primal, ancient. The medic lowered his voice slightly. The predator likely retreated because the human stopped behaving like prey. That line settled hard across the canyon. Because everyone present had felt it. The moment fear changed direction. The moment the wounded human became more frightening than the creature attacking him. Princess Lyra looked down at Kyle quietly. He stayed in front of me, even after he collapsed. The medics exchanged another uneasy glance. One finally answered softly. That would be consistent with human pack bond instincts. Vexus slowly looked toward the blood-covered stone where Kyle had made his stand. Then toward the dark mist beyond the cliffs. Then back at the human boy barely conscious at his daughter's side. And for the first time in years, the warlord looked unsettled. Not by the beast, by humanity. Because he realized something dangerous. Humans did not become fearless when protecting someone. They became worse than fearless. They became willing. 3 days later, the royal war chamber was silent, not respectful, uneasy. Hundreds of military commanders, noble houses, royal officials, and alien representatives filled the massive circular hall beneath towering black banners marked with the insignia of Warlord Vexus. Nobody understood why they had been summoned. Rumors had already spread across multiple sectors. The princess attacked. A Nerok predator destroyed half the convoy. A human civilian fought the beast and survived. Most assumed the gathering would end with political damage control or compensation negotiations. Nobody expected the human boy himself to be present. Kyle stood near the center platform, wearing clean dark clothing provided by the royal medics. His left arm remained wrapped heavily beneath reinforced medical bindings, while scars stretched visibly along his neck and shoulder. He still looked exhausted. Still pale, but alive. That alone unsettled many in the chamber. Nerok predators killed trained warriors, yet this human teenager had survived long enough to fight one nearly barehanded. The nobles studied him carefully, trying to understand what exactly he was. Kyle looked deeply uncomfortable under the attention. Princess Lyra stood beside him anyway. That caused even more tension. Several commanders exchanged quiet whispers immediately. Royal proximity carried meaning. Political meaning. Dangerous meaning. Then the chamber doors opened. Warlord Vexus entered. The room straightened instantly. Silence became absolute. The warlord crossed the chamber slowly before stopping directly in front of the central assembly. His expression remained cold and unreadable as his gaze moved across the gathered nobles and military leaders. "You all know why we are here," he said. No one answered. Because no one truly did. Vexus turned slightly toward Kale. "This human protected my daughter during the Nerok attack. Murmurs spread immediately through the chamber, despite everyone already knowing the story. Hearing the warlord confirm it publicly made it real in a different way. He acted while trained warriors hesitated. Vexus continued. Several soldiers lowered their eyes, not in shame, in discomfort, because it was true. The convoy guards had followed protocol. The human had followed instinct. And instinct moved faster. He suffered catastrophic injuries, the warlord said, and continued fighting after survival probability reached 0. Now the room became quieter again, because the phrasing mattered. Continued fighting, not survived. Continued. Vexus activated a holographic display above the center platform. Footage from damaged convoy drones flickered into view across the chamber. The attack. The chaos. The predator tearing through armored guards. Then, Kael, running directly toward it. The footage shook violently as explosions filled the canyon, but everyone clearly saw the moment the human placed himself between the beast and the princess. Saw the bite. Saw him stand back up. Saw him attack something far larger and stronger while bleeding across the canyon floor. No military precision. No tactical structure. Just relentless aggression. The footage ended with the predator retreating, and the human still shielding the princess even while collapsing. Silence followed. Heavy silence, because watching it felt different than hearing about it. One noble finally spoke carefully. He acted irrationally. Kael looked confused for half a second. The warlord did not. He acted human. That answer settled across the chamber immediately. Vexus enlarged the medical analysis next. Hormonal spikes, pain suppression response, protective neural overload patterns. The same conclusion appeared again across the display. Pack bond response detected. Murmurs spread faster now. Some confused, some disturbed, some openly uncomfortable. One military commander frowned deeply. You were suggesting humans become combat unstable through emotional attachment? The royal medic answered instead. Yes. Another commander crossed his arms. That is weakness. Kael almost laughed at that. Almost. The medic shook his head slowly. No, weakness would have been self-preservation. The chamber quieted again, because no one had a counter-argument ready. Vexus stepped forward. For centuries, he said, our people defined warriors through discipline, bloodline, and fearlessness. His eyes shifted toward the assembled military houses. We believed emotional attachment weakened combat efficiency. A pause. We were wrong. That sentence hit harder than expected. Alien war culture had followed the same principles for generations. Warriors trained themselves to detach emotionally because attachment created hesitation. But the human had demonstrated the opposite. Attachment created aggression. Unpredictable aggression, the kind predators feared. Vexus turned toward Kael fully now. When the beast attacked, what did you feel? Kael hesitated slightly under the attention. Honestly, yes, I was terrified. Several nobles exchanged confused looks immediately. The warlord remained focused. But you still attacked. Kael shrugged weakly with his good shoulder. She needed help. Like the answer remained obvious. Simple. The chamber struggled more with that simplicity than anything else, because there was no glory in his explanation. No desire for honor, no strategic objective. He protected her because he cared, and somehow that had overpowered fear itself. Princess Lyra stepped forward before anyone else could speak. He never tried to look brave, she said quietly. The room focused on her immediately. He just refused to leave me alone. That line changed the atmosphere again. The story stopped sounding like combat. It started sounding personal, real. Vexus slowly faced the assembly one final time. Humans do not bond through blood alone, he said. They bond through trust. A pause. And once that trust forms, they become extraordinarily dangerous to anything threatening it. No one interrupted him now, because too many had already seen the evidence. The warlord descended the steps toward Kael slowly. The chamber watched carefully, unsure what came next. Punishment. Reward. Political declaration. Nobody knew. Then, Warlord Vexus stopped directly in front of the injured human boy and lowered himself to one knee. The entire chamber froze. Absolute shock spread instantly across every face in the hall. Warlords did not kneel, not to nobles, not to generals, certainly not to human civilians. Kael looked horrified. "My lord, you don't have to. You protected my blood," Vexus interrupted calmly. The warlord placed a closed fist against his chest in formal warrior salute. "And earned mine." The chamber erupted into stunned whispers immediately. Several nobles looked genuinely outraged, others simply looked afraid. Because they understood exactly how significant this moment was becoming. Vexus stood again and turned toward the assembly. From this day forward, he declared, voice echoing through the hall, humans will be recognized as warrior-class allies across all Vexian territories. Complete silence followed. Then, absolute chaos. Nobles shouting, commanders arguing, representatives protesting loudly. Warrior status had never been granted to an outsider species before. Never. It meant military respect, protected rights, political standing, honor, recognition. And all of it had just been given to humanity because one terrified human boy refused to abandon someone he cared about. Vexus ignored the outrage completely. Because his decision had already been made. The predator understood the truth before we did, he said over the noise. That line silenced the chamber again. It saw what humans become when protecting their own. His gaze shifted briefly toward Kael and Lyra standing beside each other. And it retreated. The hall remained silent after that. Because nobody could deny it anymore. Not after the footage. Not after the medical scans. Not after the stories spread across half the galaxy in only 3 days. Humans were not the strongest species. They were not the most disciplined. Not the most advanced. But when they truly cared about someone, they became something else entirely. Something even monsters learned to fear. And deep in the outer sectors, stories began spreading from world to world about the wounded human boy who stood between a princess and a death-world predator. Not because he was ordered to, not because he was trained to, but because somewhere in the middle of the chaos, his human heart had made a decision. And once humans make that kind of decision, they do not stop.